Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to Love and Abuse. All the information on this podcast is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I read a comment on one of the episodes on my site at loveandabuse.com. The episode title was, "If You Leave Me, I'll Kill Myself, the Ultimate Abuse of Your Empathy and Compassion." And the comment talks about how this woman was in a relationship with this man who was very clingy and very needy. And I really resonated with her comment, and I don't think I've covered this topic at least a lot on this podcast, where someone is really needy or really clingy, and how that actually could lead to obsessive type behavior like this, where somebody can get to the point where no matter what, they need to have you in their life. And I'm sharing this today because I need to make sure that I convey that if you meet or are with a very needy or clingy person, someone who always wants to be with you, always wants to spend every single moment with you, when you go out with your friends or family, or no matter where you are, they want to be with you or always keep in touch with you. That is a flag. That is at least an orange flag, if not a red flag. Now, before I get any messages saying what's wrong with that, because there are some people out there that say, well, I love that so-and-so is needy or clingy. I don't know if I'm going to get too many messages like that, but I'm sure it will happen. Or they'll say, I'm needy or clingy, but I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to tell someone that if they leave me, I'll kill myself. I understand, because I'm sharing this from the perspective of a formerly and sometimes presently needy and clingy person. I was always a needy and clingy person. I always felt like I needed to have a partner with me. I never wanted to be single. Being single meant being alone. Being alone meant I'd be unhappy. And being unhappy was not something on my radar. It's not something I wanted. It's not something most people want. They don't want to be unhappy. You don't want to be unhappy. But for me, I was all about having a relationship. And as soon as my relationship ended, I had to get another one. And as soon as that next one started, I wanted to be with them all the time. And this isn't like the honeymoon period, where you start a relationship and you both want to be together. That is a wonderful time. You're learning about each other. You're probably learning about each other's bodies. It's all new. It's novel to the brain. It's firing off endorphins, and you are just so attached to each other, and it's wonderful. It's a great feeling. It's the falling in love feeling. I'm talking about after that settles. Who is the person after that settles? I mean, who are you? Who are they? If you are with somebody who's needy and clingy, someone who just has to be with you all the time, after that honeymoon period, you just have to be aware and be careful that that neediness and clinginess doesn't lead to obsessive behavior. Because, like I said, I'm speaking to you from the perspective of a formerly excessively needy and clingy person. And it took every failure of every relationship, of every person in my life, or at least most of them, saying, I want to go out with my friends without you having to keep tabs on me. I want to spend time with my family. I want to do this by myself. It took a lot for me to realize that it wasn't an abandonment. It wasn't a rejection. It was allowing someone to be themselves, to Be an individual that makes their own decisions, that goes out into the world and has a life and had a life before they met me. Just like if you have a romantic partner, they had a life before you met them. And that life changes when you meet, but how much does it change? For me, my life changed completely when I met my next romantic partner. My life changed in the sense that I no longer felt attached to who I was as an individual. And this is where things can get a little hairy, is that you can meet someone who was an individual before you met, then no longer felt attached to being an individual anymore, and felt like they were a couple, you and them, and only you and them, not just them by themselves. It's not just me anymore. And I think that's a warning flag to look at if there's no more I in the relationship. You know how there's no I in team? There is an I in relationship. There has to be. There has to be an I in relationship. So there is you, them, and us. This is my perspective. This may not be your perspective, but I think it's a good perspective to have. I think it's a healthy perspective to have. There's you, there's me, and then there's us. And the reason I like to look at that as separate entities is because there are times where you should be you. You should have your autonomy to make your own decisions, to do your own thing. You know, within the relationship boundaries, of course. But you should be able to see friends and see family and talk to friends and family. And you should have your private time. You should have your me time, just as they should. I know in my past, my history, my me time, I invited the person I was with into my me time. I wanted them there. I was clingy. I was needy. It was better to have them there for me because it was a reminder that I was still loved. It was a reminder. It was a reinforcement, actually. It was a reinforcement that the relationship was still good. Because in the background of my mind, there was always this small fear that the relationship may not survive or may not last through a small tiff or a small disagreement. This fear is what drove the obsession. This fear is what drove the neediness and the clinginess. I was always afraid that we wouldn't be together anymore, that we might separate. So it was important that I was stuck at their hip. And this is why it's so vital to have these three entities in a relationship: me, you, and us. Otherwise, you feel drained by somebody who doesn't want to be just I. This doesn't mean that you are separate individuals doing your own thing all the time. It just means you have time to do that. It means you have time to be on your own and do your own thing and see who you want to see, again, within the relationship boundaries. I don't know if I have to explain relationship boundaries, but your relationship boundaries are what you decide as a couple is acceptable in the relationship. If monogamy is the acceptable parameter, then monogamy is the boundary. If it's not, that's a different type of relationship and you have to have a discussion about it. But that's a good example of a relationship boundary. You have relationship boundaries and that's what you follow. So this is what I mean when you have these three entities in the relationship: me, you, and us. I want to be able to do things without you being attached at my hip and wondering what I'm doing all the time. It sounds cold. It sounds like I'm saying, stay out of my stuff, stay out of my life. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you should be able to do that too, because we were individuals when we met. Even if we were in different relationships, we were a person. We were somebody that didn't have you in our life, which means we have our own interests, we have our own hobbies, we have our own connections and family and friends. We have all these components that make up our identity and how we feel and how we feel good. What makes us feel good? What makes us feel connected to people in the world at large? This is what we've created, and this is who we are when we get into a relationship. So when you meet someone that is very needy and very clingy, that's not necessarily a bad sign, but it is something you need to be aware of, because neediness and clinginess can turn into obsessive behavior. And that's why I had to create that episode. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. I don't even want to create that episode, but there's so many people that have experienced that. That information is searched for over and over again, because it's very hard to find information on that when you're with somebody who wants to hurt themselves if you leave them, or if you threaten to leave them, or even mention it, or even if they take something the wrong way. That is an emotionally dangerous situation. And I was telling somebody in the comment section on that episode, which I transcribed for the website, I said the most caring, kindest, generous, supportive people, the ones with empathy, the ones that have their heart open, are the ones that are most prone, most vulnerable to someone like this, because their heart is so open. And when they meet someone who's so loving and caring and compassionate and kind, that starts all the juices flowing, and it really feels right. It really feels good. It really feels like the best thing that could happen. But when the neediness and the clinginess don't end after the honeymoon period, now you have what might be called obsessive behavior. And the obsessive behavior gets worse and worse and becomes emotionally abusive behavior, because what they do is they start controlling you by making you feel bad and making you feel guilty. And if you do something that they don't want you to do, they'll make sure to convince you that it's wrong to do it. And they do that by saying things that make you sound heartless. They'll make you sound cold, like you don't care. And the biggest problem in these types of relationships is that the kind, compassionate, caring person that's with the clingy, needy person is going to start to feel guilty because they care. This is why most of us feel guilty, because we care. If you feel guilty, it's because you care. It's because you love. It's because your heart is open. It's because you don't want people to think that you are hurtful toward them. You want them to think that you love them and you care about them and you want them to be okay. And the clingy, needy person that becomes obsessive and becomes emotionally abusive using your kindness against you will make sure that you feel bad, bad enough that you continue doing what they want you to do. This type of relationship does not get better. In fact, I would say it gets worse and it flatlines, and it stays flatlined until you get out of it. And this is the hardest part, getting out of it, because you are so kind and so compassionate and so caring that you don't want the other person to hurt themselves or feel bad, because you're not that type of person that wants people to feel bad. So what you end up doing is staying in a relationship with someone who continues to use your kindness and compassion and empathy against you. And that destroys you emotionally. And then you feel like you're stuck. So I know there are people that are listening to this that feel stuck. I know where you are. I get it. From the perspective of the person I used to be, if my girlfriend left, it would have been a major disaster in my life. It would have been the end of happiness. That was my perspective back then. It took a long time for me to realize that my source of happiness should not be from another person. That shouldn't be my source of happiness. If I make it my source of happiness, then what do I do when that person's not in my life? Do I just be unhappy? No, I mean, that's what happened, but that's not a healthy perspective. It's a very toxic way of thinking. And when you have this perspective and you have this belief system that somebody else should be your primary source for happiness, that can create the obsessive behaviors that lead to using somebody else's kindness, compassion, and empathy against them. And so I have some tips for getting out of a relationship like that. Like I said, at loveandabuse.com, just look for that title, or just type in the word "if you leave me" in the search field on that website, and you'll find it. And that'll be helpful to you if you're in that situation Hopefully you're not. But like I said, I did an episode on that. And that's like the extreme. I mean, if somebody says, if you leave me, I'll kill myself, that is the extreme. And it's also the extreme in emotional abuse. I mean, that is the title of the episode, the ultimate abuse of your empathy and compassion. That is the most extreme they can get. Because they know that you don't want them to hurt themselves, so they control you by making you believe they will if they leave. And the hard part is sometimes they will. Sometimes they will hurt themselves. But do you take responsibility for their behaviors? And a lot of kind, generous, open-hearted people often do. You know, that's what happens, is that you're so kind, you're so caring, you believe that you are the source of somebody else's happiness and comfort and reason for living, even. If you believe you're the reason that somebody else is going to not hurt themselves or stay alive, then you are taking on way too much. So to wrap this up, I started talking about neediness and clinginess, and I just think it's important to remember that when you're with a needy and clingy person, if it's a new relationship, you need to set firm boundaries. You need to say, hey, look, I know you want to be with me all the time, but I need my private time. I need my me time, and I need to know that you'll be okay with it. You know, if one of my partners said that to me in life, if the relationship was brand new and they said, look, I'm going to go see my friends and I can't have you lingering over my shoulder all the time, or texting me, or asking me to call you every time I go somewhere to make sure I'm okay. I can't have that kind of, it feels like micromanagement. I can't have that kind of micromanagement in my life. So if you don't think you can handle me going out with friends and seeing my family and having private time to myself, I understand, and maybe this won't work out. But if this is going to work out, you're going to have to accept that this is what I do. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I was before I met you. This is who I've always been. I'm a social person, you know, if that's you. But if it's, you know, something else, I want to be by myself sometimes. I just need to make sure that you're okay with that. Are you okay with me having my own me time? Or are you going to be worried? Are you going to be controlling? You might even have to say that word. I don't know. But you want to bring it up. A new relationship, you want to bring this stuff up because you want to find out where it's going to go. And again, this is usually after the honeymoon phase, which is 2 to 4 months, sometimes longer, sometimes not, but that's typical. B, if this is a relationship that's already established, now you have an issue because you're both rooted into a relationship that has already set the standard for how things are going to go. Meaning there is a certain level of tolerance and resilience that you can develop for behaviors that you don't necessarily appreciate or don't like at all. And if you've already tolerated those behaviors, then they've become more or less acceptable in the relationship. And when you're with somebody that does emotionally abusive behavior that's become tolerated, for lack of a better term, they believe that it's okay to continue doing those behaviors because you're still there. And that establishes the emotionally abusive relationship. Once the behavior has been tolerated and they see that you haven't left and there's no accountability for it, they have no reason to stop because whatever they're doing apparently is working for them. From their perspective, it's working. And so when you're in that situation, you do have to either start setting the boundaries and see what happens, or have a conversation, say, look, you know, this has been going on a while and I really need to talk about it. Or if that's too dangerous, you might have to do something else. You might have to take a bigger step. You might have to leave the relationship. I hope you're in a relationship where you can have a conversation and it can go well. But if you're in a relationship where you try to have a conversation and it's almost always one-sided and it's almost always your fault, and no matter what you say, it's never enough or never right or never good enough, then you're probably in a no-win situation, meaning there's nothing you can do. And if there's nothing you can do, there's really only two directions. You can either stay and deal with it, you know, just live with it, which I don't think it's a good idea, but sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes you just have to deal with it for now. Or you take the next step that's right for you, and that could be leaving, could be separating, could be staying in different rooms if it's a romantic relationship for a while, or if it's a family relationship or a friendship of some sort, just not contacting them for a while, or going no contact where you block them at all possible points of entry. There's a number of things that you may want to do or need to do or have to do. I mean, sometimes you just have to do something that protects you. If you know you're the type of person that's going to feel so bad because they make you feel bad, because they make you think that it's your fault that they're not happy, then you're in an emotionally dangerous situation. It's an emotionally destructive situation. It is something that is going to wear you down and eat away at you from the inside out. So no matter what situation you're in, I hope this information has been helpful for you to make any decision that you need to make, give you any strength or confidence if you need that, and start any healing process if that's what needs to happen. But no matter what, remember there are always 3 components that make a relationship work, and that is me, you, and us. And when each one of those is nurtured, each one of those is cared about, when the other person cares that you have your autonomy, that you have your independence, and you love being together, and you care that they have their autonomy and they have their independence and you love being together, all within the confines of the relationship boundaries, of course, then I think you can create something great. But when it becomes one person controlling another in the many ways I talk about in this show, that's when it becomes an issue and, of course, emotionally abusive. I hope this helps. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. Use the workbook to help you determine if you are in an emotionally abusive relationship and give you the tools to pinpoint the specific unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. If you're in a difficult relationship and you want to know what your next steps should be, the workbook will help you make decisions that are right for you. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. And if you've discovered that you are doing the emotionally abusive behavior and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again soon.